Hello everybody and welcome to Notorious Yugioh. I'm Notorious Cly and this is Orcust. I finally had enough time to sit down and toy around with all the new support that's coming, and I think I've settled on a deck list that I'm satisfied to present to all of you. Please keep in mind that this is a day zero list. I haven't even had a chance to play these cards in Duel Links yet because they're not even in the game yet. So things are subject to change. With that being said, I do feel like this is a pretty good baseline list, a very good list to iterate off of and build from. Before we do a card by card, I think it might be helpful to talk about the turn 1 setup for Orcust. That way it helps put in context why we're playing cards and what their use case in the deck is. So the turn 1 goal of Orcust is to end with Orchestrated Babel face up on your side of the field, Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star in your graveyard, and Orcust Cymbal Skeleton in your graveyard, or a way to get Orcust Cymbal Skeleton in your graveyard. So Orchestrated Babel turns all of your Link Monsters effects into quick effects, all your Orcust Link Monsters effects into quick effects, and it turns all the effects of your Orcust monsters in the graveyard into quick effects. Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star, has a bunch of effects, but the one that we're concerned about for a turn 1 setup is when it is special summoned, you can send one card your opponent controls to the graveyard. And then Orcust Cymbal Skeleton, while it is in the graveyard, you can banish it from the graveyard to special summon an Orcust monster from your graveyard. So Cymbal Skeleton is the means to special summon Dingirsu to send one card your opponent controls, and all of that is enabled by Orchestrated Babel. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's do a quick card by card. So first up is Scrap Recycler. Wait, that's not an Orcust, but it might as well be. So Scrap Recycler is the best normal summon in the deck and might be the best card in the deck. It fuels a 1-card combo that gets you all of your Orcust setup. So when Scrap Recycler is normal or special summoned, most commonly normal summoned in this deck, you will be able to send one machine monster from your deck to the graveyard. That's right, any one machine monster. So Scrap Recycler is so incredibly important for this deck list because one of the primary issues with Orcust up until this point has been trying to get them into the graveyard so you can actually start playing. Scrap Recycler does that for you on normal summon. Next up are the Orcust cards. Let's pause here and talk about the common effect of all the Orcust cards. While they are in the graveyard, you can banish them from the graveyard to do something. Harp Horror, Cymbal Skeleton, and Brass Bombard can special summon another Orcust monster from different places. And Orcust Knightmare can send one Orcust monster, one Dark Machine monster from your deck to the graveyard. So Harp Horror can banish itself to special summon an Orcust monster from your deck. Cymbal Skeleton can special summon one from your graveyard. And Brass Bombard can special summon one from your hand. And then we already mentioned Orcust Knightmare. He's the oddball. He gets to send a Dark Machine type monster from your deck to the graveyard. So we're playing 3 copies of Orcust Harp Horror because theoretically it is best Orcust because it can get you access into any of your other Orcusts. And we're playing 2 copies of Cymbal Skeleton because you always want to have one Cymbal Skeleton in your deck because you need to be able to send it off of Orcust Knightmare to complete your turn 1 setup sometimes. So always having one in a place where you can be able to send it to the graveyard to set up your Dingirsu play is very important. Next up, we're playing 2 copies of Brass Bombard. I don't know if I should be playing 2 copies or 3 copies of this because Brass Bombard is part of a 2-card combo that can get you basically full setup, thanks to the new addition of Linkuriboh. But we'll probably touch on that during the combo section of the video. Next up is our 1 copy of Orcust Knightmare. You're playing 1 copy of Orcust Knightmare because you don't really want to see it in your starting hand. Ideally, you want to be special summoning it from deck off of something like Harp Horror. But if you do see it in your hand, it's not the worst thing in the world because you do have ways to get it on the field and then in the graveyard. So it's a garnet, but kind of a soft garnet. It doesn't stop you from playing altogether, but it does make things a little tricky sometimes. The same thing can be said about World Legacy World Wand. World Legacy World Wand is very important because it allows you to really extend and set up on your turn 1 combo. We have less ways to get World Wand out of your hand if you do manage to draw it, which is one of the reasons why we're only playing 1 copy. But thankfully, something like Orchestrated Return does exist that does give us some outlet to get it out of our hand. Next up is 1 copy of Orchestrated Babel. We touched on a bit what Babel does. This is so important, so crucial for the strategy, and it's kind of obvious why Konami had to put it at 1. Being able to let your Link monsters and your Orcust monsters in graveyard play on your opponent's turn does so much for this deck. So important. We're only playing 1 copy because we're only allowed to play 1 copy. Next up is Orchestrated Return. We're playing 3 copies of this because this helps solve one of the problems of Orcust deck list, which is how to get Orcust in the graveyard. Orchestrated Return lets you put an Orcust in the graveyard and then draw 2 cards. Normally sending 1 card to the graveyard is kind of a negative or a downside, but being able to put an Orcust monster in the graveyard and then draw 2 cards on top of that is hardly a detriment. It's more of a benefit. And then lastly, we have our honorary copies of Limit 3 staples. I'm only playing 2 because I wanted to keep the list as close to 20 cards as possible to keep it as consistent as possible to see something like Scrap Recycler, because I haven't really found a way to search Scrap Recycler yet. I'm not sure if there even is one. You can play whatever you want in the place of IDP. It could be Compulse, could be whatever other Limit 3 staple you have, or just something as simple as like a Book of Moon. Then I'm playing 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. Cosmic Cyclone over stuff like MST because Orchestrated Babel is a thing. One thing I didn't cover with Babel is that Babel can actually add itself back to your hand if it's in the graveyard. So something like Cosmic Cyclone becomes very important when you consider that Orcust is coming to the game, because you want to be able to get rid of your opponent's Babel for good. And it also helps that Cosmic Cyclone hits something like the PK traps that kind of have bothersome graveyard effects, and stuff like my beloved Red Rain, which you want to make sure your opponent cannot recycle. So Cosmic Cyclone over MST. Again, only playing 2 copies because I wanted to keep the list as close to 20 as possible, and I'm not really sure what to cut or change yet. Let's go ahead and talk about the extra deck, and then we'll talk about other options that I've considered playing or I'm going to think about. So first up is 2 copies of Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star. We're going to cover all of its effects because this is the boss monster of the deck. Fantastic card. So Dingirsu is a rank 8 Xyz monster, and you can only special summon Dingirsu once per turn. They needed that restriction because you can also Xyz summon this card by using an Orcust Link monster you control. This is how Orcust is able to make a rank 8 with ease. And then Dingirsu also has another effect. If a card or cards you control would be destroyed by Battle or card effect, you can detach 1 material from this card instead. And then its final effect, and probably the most important one, is if it is special summoned, you can activate one of these effects. You can send 1 card your opponent controls to the graveyard, or you can attach one of your banished machine monsters to this card as material. You will use both of those effects, the attach probably on your turn 1 setup, and the send on your opponent's turn, and then probably the send on your follow-up turn to clear your opponent's board and win the game. Dingirsu is a fantastic card. It's also decently statted at 2,600 attack and 2,100 defense, which means it's really going to be a lethal threat for you. Next up is 1 copy of Longirsuh. I mentioned this earlier. We're playing it because Brass Bombard is part of a 2-card combo. Linkuriboh is what really enables that 2-card combo to exist because it allows you to put a normal summon Brass Bombard in graveyard, which means you can use Brass Bombard's effect to banish itself, and then special summon the other Orcust, the 2nd card of the 2-card combo, from your hand to get the ball rolling. Next up is 3 copies of Galatea. I'm playing 3 because your basic turn 1 combo runs through 2 copies of Galatea, and I really like having the 3rd one for follow-up. I don't know if you can get away with playing 2 copies, but that's definitely something I'll probably try. For now, I wouldn't advise it though. Galatea is so important for the deck that I would just play the 3 copies and be safe about it. So Galatea is a link tube that requires 2 effect monsters, including an Orcust monster, and this linked card cannot be destroyed by battle. Keep that in mind for the combo part of the video. And then you can target one of your banished machine monsters, shuffle it into the deck, then you can set 1 Orcust spell or trap directly from your deck. This is how we are going to get access to Orchestrated Babel and enable our selves to play on our opponent's turn. It's also worth mentioning now that if Orchestrated Babel is face up on your field, or if you already have Babel because you opened it, Galatea can grab something like an Orchestrated Return. And if you do happen to grab it on your opponent's turn, grabbing an Orchestrated Return for follow-up is incredible because you can basically get yourself a draw 3 when it comes back to your turn. Crazy, 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 crazy. Galatea is fantastic. And then next up we have Longirsu, the Orchestrator. Longirsu is probably a follow-up option for this deck. I think there are some hands that can make Longirsu, but I don't necessarily know if it's the best thing to be doing on your turn 1. So it's a link 3 that requires 2 effect monsters, including an Orcust monster, and this link card cannot be destroyed by card effects. And then you can target 2 of your banished machine monsters, shuffle them into the deck, then you can send 1 link monster your opponent controls to the graveyard. This card cannot attack the turn you have activated this effect. Please remember that. And then you can only use the effect once per turn. So you could, in theory, make Longirsu with Babel face up on the field to use this effect to send a link monster your opponent controls to the graveyard. Keep in mind, Longirsu has an arrow that points up and to the left, meaning if it's in your right monster zone, it points to 2 of your opponent's monster zones. But that seems like it's going to require too much investment and too much setup to pull off consistently, or it might be an overcommit to do it even if you have the resources to do so. And then next up, we have one copy of Knightmare Unicorn. Unicorn is probably the flex spot for the extra deck. Feel free to play what you like. I like Unicorn just because shuffling back is so very important, and it never hurts that it has a discard cost, which could help put an extra Orcust name in the graveyard in rotation to allow you to keep playing after you shuffle one of your opponent's cards back. Alright, let's talk about the cards that I've considered playing and have thought about. So first up is Machina Fortress. Machina Fortress has seen play in Orcust lists in the past because it serves as a discard outlet in some hands. I'm not considering Machina Fortress because it's not a dark monster, which means you would have to lead with Machina Fortress. You can't follow up after you've committed to using your Orcust monster's effects. So next up we have Borreload Dragon. Borreload Dragon would probably be played in place of Knightmare Unicorn, and this would give the deck another big powerful boss to go into other than Dingirsu. But I think a Link 4 that requires 3 effect monsters is probably a little bit too much investment than I'm willing to commit to. So right now I think I'll stick with the Unicorn. Next up is Orcust. I just realized that I had been saying this card's name wrong the entire time I was doing the box analysis, so please roast me for it in the comments. Orcust suffers from kind of the same problem as Borreload Dragon, where it's a Link 4. Does only require 2 effect monsters, but I think by the time you're ready to use its effect, you could have won the game already, or there's just better options available. I don't think it's a bad inclusion if you're a free-to-play player or you're new to the game and you acquired it during your route to get all the other Orcust cards, but it's not something I would prioritize playing. So this Link card cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. You can target 3 of your banished machine monsters, shuffle them into the deck, and if you do, the attack and defense of any Link monsters your opponent currently controls become 0, also their effects are negated. Fantastic effect. You get to drop their attack and defense to 0, negate their effects, sitting at 3000 attack, which means you get to ram a 3000 attack monster into a 0 attack or defense monster. But the fact that you need 3 banished machine monsters to use its effect means it probably requires a little bit too much setup. Next option that I've considered playing is Brute Enforcer. Not a bad removal option. It's a Dark Link monster. It's a Link 2, which means it's good, it's accessible, and you can discard 1 card, then target 1 face-up card your opponent controls. Your opponent can discard a card to negate the effect, which is probably one of the reasons why I favor something like Unicorn over it. In addition to that, Brute Enforcer destroys a card and Unicorn shuffles. So although Unicorn requires a little more investment to make and a discard cost, I still like it over Brute Enforcer. And next up are the Orcust traps. They're kind of mediocre. I think 2 of them are bad, and then 1 of them is mediocre, the mediocre one being Orchestrated Core. Orchestrated Core, I'm not going to bother reading it because I don't think I'm going to consider playing it. I might end up putting it in the list, I'm not sure yet. But it basically just gives your Orcust monsters protection for the turn, which isn't bad for insulating your turn 1 board. But when you consider that your primary target for your turn 1 setup is going to be Babel, and you only have 1 Babel, so it's not like you can really draw into Babel that consistently, I don't think you'd really want to be playing any of the other Orcust spell traps. You can always do the thing that I talked about and use Galatea on your opponent's turn to set an Orcust spell or trap, but trap cards can't be set the turn they're activated unless you get a busted skill from Konami. Thank you. So I don't really think it's going to do you much on your opponent's turn. And then Orchestrated Release, it's a very conditional special summon from your graveyard. You could just play something like Call the Haunted. I know Release is searchable, which is like the advantage of it, but I still don't think it's that good. And then Orchestrated Attack requires your opponent's monsters to declare attack. If you're doing that, you could probably be playing something a little more powerful or game-winning like Magic Cylinder or Mirror Force. You shouldn't be playing those anyways because battle traps are kind of bad because they have to survive to the battle phase, and then your opponent has to do the thing that they need to activate. So yeah, I definitely would not recommend playing those. All right, everybody, and that's going to be it for the deck profile. Let's jump over to the combo screen, and I'll show you 2 of the bread and butter combos for Orcust. All right, everybody, we are here, and I think I may have just lied to you. They're not 2 of the bread and butter combos for Orcust. They're the 2 different ways to get through the same combo for Orcust. So the first one involves Scrap Recycler, and it's a true 1-card combo. So all you're going to do is normal summon Scrap Recycler, and you're going to go ahead and send Orcust Harp Horror from your deck to the graveyard. Then you're going to go ahead and use Orcust Harp Horror's effect in graveyard. I'm just going to refer to it as Harp now because I am slowly losing my voice and maybe my mind. So you're going to banish Harp and use its effect to special summon Orcust Knightmare from your deck. We now have an Orcust monster and another material on board, so we're going to go ahead and link those off for Galatea. It's worth mentioning now that you could use Galatea's effect to go ahead and shuffle in the one banished machine monster to set Babel, but I always like to wait till the end of the combo, just in case other avenues or lines of play come up. Keep in mind that this was off of one scrap recycler, so you will have 3 other cards to potentially play with. So now we're going to go ahead and use Orcust Knightmare to banish itself, to send from our deck to the graveyard the World Legacy World Wand. So World Wand goes to the graveyard, and then we're going to use World Legacy World Wand's effect to banish itself and special summon back Orcust Knightmare. Very important that you choose Knightmare here. So now that we have these two set up, we're going to go ahead and overlay for Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star. Since Galatea is an Orcust Link monster, we can do that. And I never like putting monsters in the extra monster zone in a Link-based deck, so I always try to summon it somewhere else. So now that we've done that, Dingirsu was special summoned, so we can go ahead and attach one of our banished monsters to it. So we're going to go ahead and attach Harp to Dingirsu. Now we're going to go ahead and link Dingirsu off and Orcust Knightmare for our second copy of Galatea. And very important that Galatea ends up in the right monster zone, because Galatea has a bottom left arrow. And if you remember, Galatea cannot be destroyed by battle when it is linked. So if you link Galatea to the thing that you're going to summon here during your opponent's turn, everything should be a-okay. It should make your board that much harder to out. So now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and use Galatea's effect to shuffle back the World Wand and set from our deck Orchestrated Babel. I'm just going to choose to activate it here, just because Dueling Books is a little weird like that. So keep in mind, Orchestrated Babel will be set, so you will have to activate it. You can activate it, and then that's our turn 1 setup. So you may be noticing now that we're missing a key piece of the puzzle, which is like, how do we get Dingirsu out of the graveyard? Well, during our opponent's turn, it could be during the draw phase or the standby phase, because all of our monsters' effects are quick effects now, at least the Orcust monsters in the graveyard. We can go ahead and use the effect of Orcust Knightmare to banish itself and send from our deck to the graveyard the Orcust Cymbal Skeleton. And now at any point when our opponent commits to the board, we can use Cymbal Skeleton's effect to banish itself and special summon the Dingirsu. And if we do that, I would always special summon it to the middle zone so that Galatea points to it. Now Galatea cannot be destroyed by battle. And that's the 1-card Scrap Recycler combo. Let's go ahead and show you the 2-card combo, and then I think that's it for combos. So the next 2-card combo involves Orcust Brass Bombard and Orcust Harp Horror. I've chose Harp Horror. It could theoretically be another Orcust name, but Harp Horror is the other one that we were playing at 3 copies, so statistically we're the most likely to see it. So it's a little cherry-picked, a little statistics. It is what it is. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon the Brass Bombard. Since it is a level 1 monster, we will link it off for the Linkuriboh. And now we can use Brass Bombard's effect to banish itself from the graveyard and special summon the Harp Horror from our hand. Now that we have an Orcust monster and a non-Orcust monster, we can go ahead and link those two off for Galatea. And then we get to go ahead and use Harp Horror's effect in graveyard to banish itself. There we go. And special summon from our deck Orcust Knightmare. Now we can go ahead and overlay for Dingirsu. And Dingirsu can go ahead and attach either one of these. I would go ahead and attach the Harp Horror just because that's more useful on follow-up in our opponent's turn, because it can special summon any Orcust monster from deck. So let's go ahead and attach this to our Dingirsu. And then we will go ahead and link these two off for our copy of Galatea. And then Galatea will go ahead and use its effect to shuffle in the Orcust Brass Bombard and set our copy of Orchestrated Babel, at which point we will activate Babel. Now keep in mind, you can extend a little bit further in this combo, since we haven't used the effect of Orcust Knightmare yet. You can always go ahead and use the effect of Orcust Knightmare to banish itself, to go ahead and send the World Wand from deck to graveyard, then use World Wand to banish itself, to special summon back the Orcust Knightmare, and then link off the Orcust Knightmare. But I don't really know what the payoff for that is yet. Ideally, it could be something like a Longirsu, but Longirsu requires the setup to be effective, and I don't really know if that's an overcommit. Please keep in mind too that when you're thinking about extending for this combo, you are only playing with 2 cards, so you should have another 2 cards available to combo with. So there may be cards in your hand that alter and change your route of play. So I think those are our 2 combos, everybody. I'll see you back at the deck profile screen. Here we are, everybody, back at the deck profile screen, and I am just combing through these cards to think if there's anything I missed bringing up during the deck profile of the combo, and the only thing I can really think of is that there is potentially another 2-card combo that exists, which includes Orchestrated Return and Orchestrated Harp Horror, but that one is a little dependent on RNG because you'll probably need to draw something good off of the Orchestrated Return. Since I can't really think of anything else, I think it's about time I give you my closing thoughts and expectations for this deck. I think Orcust is likely a solid King of Games deck list right now. There's a few things that have me worried about the deck that really are keeping me from saying that it's going to tear apart the meta. And please take my words with a grain of salt. All of you know how intelligent I am and how intelligent I'm not. So please don't take my word as gospel. Please just use my deck profiles and all my videos as extra pieces of information to add to your own little puzzle to help you build the bigger picture so you can make the best decision for you. The last thing I ever want is for somebody to go out and spend a bunch of gems because I hyped them up on a deck list that ended up being pretty mediocre. That's not what I'm here for. What I'm here for is to create fun, interesting content and really share my love of the game with all of you. And one of the reasons why I like doing these deck profiles is because deck building is half the game, and it's an incredibly fun half of the game for me as well. So back to Orcust. I think this is a King of Games level list. There's a couple things that make me nervous about it though. One, this deck is heavily reliant on having Orchestrated Babel to interact with your opponent on their turn. So if your opponent does happen to open an MSD or a Cosmic Cyclone, you will be able to chain all of your Orcust effects in graveyard to get monsters back on the board and get Dingirsu back on the board and be able to attach material, but they're going to lead with the spell and trap removal, which means Dingirsu is not going to be able to do anything on your opponent's turn. Neither is the Orcust Link monster you have, probably Galatea. So you're just going to have 2 monsters that are a little resilient to being removed. Galatea will be protected by battle, and then Dingirsu can't protect by battle or card destruction. But if they're sitting there not interacting with your opponent and just letting your opponent do whatever they want, I don't know how threatening 2 kind of sticky monsters are going to be. Another thing that makes me nervous is something I noticed in a few of my test hands is this particular deck list has a non-0% chance of bricking. There are some hands you will open that are just unplayable that don't really accomplish anything. Opening something like Harp Horror, another Orcust name like Cymbal Skeleton or Knightmare or World Wand plus Ice Dragon's Prison or Cosmic Cyclone will happen. There will be hands that are just unplayable. They're not so prominent that I think the deck is bad, but it is a thing that I'm still a little nervous about. I think there's probably some things you can do to make the list a little more consistent, a little more resilient to bricking, but I'm not quite sold on any one of those ideas yet to present them all to you. So those are my expectations and my closing thoughts. To summarize them and not be so long-winded about it, solid King of Games level deck. We'll have to wait and see if it can make an impact on the meta. Thank you everybody for watching this video. I can't tell you thank you enough. I really appreciate all of you tuning in and interacting, video in and video out. If you appreciate all the work and all the effort I put in these videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. I don't say that enough. I never want to pester anybody about it, but content creation is something that I want to make a big part of my life. And I can't do that without all of you. Something as simple as a like, something as simple as a comment, something as simple as subscribe, something as simple as all 3 of those makes an incredible impact. And you have no idea how much that means to me. I think that's all the pestering I'm going to do for this video. Thank you again so much, everybody, for watching. I'll see you on the next video. Be safe, have fun, everybody.